Hello and welcome to Leadapreneur Online. We're looking at Module 3, Planning, and we're looking at Step 1, Perceiving the Problem. So why does perception matter for the leader? Perception matters because in the end, the way that you perceive the situation determines the plans that you're going to make, and the plans that you make determine the actions that you will take, and those in turn determine how successful you will be. So right perception leads to right plans, leads to right actions, leads to right success. On the other hand, if you have the wrong understanding of the problem or the wrong understanding of the situation, you'll form the wrong plans and you'll take the wrong actions. So in summary, perception is crucial because it enables you to understand the right problem and solve the right challenge rather than getting carried away with things that don't really matter. So why does perception matter? Well, we are often drawn to this idea that there's only one way of perceiving the world, but this is not true. We live in an inherently subjective world, and a great way of seeing that is through this diagram. Printed for the first time in 1892 in a German human magazine called Fliegende Blätter. It's a picture of a duck. Or is it a picture of a rabbit? As you look at it, you'll see that the duck looks to the left, but the rabbit looks to the right. And as your brain tries to understand, is it a duck or a rabbit, you'll realize that there is no one answer. And this is, in essence, why perception matters, because there are more than one way of seeing any situation, and by seeing exactly the same thing, two different people can see very different things. One person in this picture would see a duck, another person would see the rabbit. And they would both be right. And so in the same way, when you're a leader and you're trying to understand the situation and the problem that you face, the way that you understand it will be very different to the way that someone else understands it. And crucially, no one way is right. So what matters is building the right perception. And of course, going to our favorite example of the football team, we can understand this straight away. So let's imagine that the football team is not being successful. Now the manager might think that's because the players aren't training hard enough. But actually it might be because the team has poor morale. Or perhaps the team is using the wrong strategy. It's easy to see here that if one leader in the team gets obsessed with solving the problem in one way without taking the time to really understand the whole situation, they can waste a lot of time solving the wrong problem. And so this is why perception matters for leaders. Because since leadership is the ability to translate vision into reality, as Warren Bennett says, if you don't have the right understanding of reality, you simply cannot do that. But as we go about translating vision into reality, it's not just simply about making a plan and letting it be done. It's not the idea that you look at the world, you perceive the world, you then build a plan, and then you'll be successful. The world is always changing, and that's why Dwight Eisenhower, 5-star US General and 34th US President, emphasize planning over plans. That is, you're always looking at the world, building a plan, taking action, but then crucially, you're going back to looking at the world, changing your plan or creating a new plan, taking action, and so on. So what he's emphasizing here, it's not just a one-step process, it's a constant feedback dynamic of perceiving the world, planning, action, perceiving the world, planning, action. And then the last quote here is from Mike Tyson, undisputed heavyweight boxing champion of the world, a man infamous for biting off his opponent's ear in a fight. And I think his quote also sums up very nicely something that we need to understand as leaders, which is that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And what I think this means is that it's all well and good building your amazing strategic plan and how you're going to be super successful when you're in your office or in your off-site meeting. But when you actually confront reality and you get punched in the face, hopefully metaphorically, those plans very quickly go out the window. So it's very important to not get too carried away with your plans, because when they confront reality, it can often be a nasty surprise. So the basic concept around planning is that it's an activity that describes how we're going to achieve the desired outcome. In short, planning looks at how we're going to do it. And in order to do that, in order to describe how we're going to do it, we obviously need to first understand what is the situation. And that's where perception comes in. Because if you perceive the situation incorrectly, then your plan of how to be successful won't succeed. And so we can think of this in a very simple 3-step cycle. First, you have to perceive the problem, then you plan the solution, then you deliver the solution, and then, as Dwight Eisenhower said, we need to go back to perceiving the problem again. And in this particular learning module, we're looking at perceiving the problem, and that's why it's highlighted in blue. Because sometimes when we look at reality, it's not actually exactly what we think, as we can see here as this giant crushes my friends. And this is a simple optical illusion, but it's sometimes very easy to deceive ourselves. For example, this picture was taken when Hurricane Sandy flooded New York, and you can see, Times Square subway underwater here. And, it really shows how dramatic the flooding was in New York. The larger problem, however, in this picture is that it's a fake, and it's actually a synthesis of two different images. So if you actually believe that this was the Times Square metro station underwater, then you are incorrect. And that just goes to show how easily we can be misled by the simplest of images. And there's a more interesting story around this. So in California, the westernmost state of the United States, well, not including Hawaii and Alaska, in California, we have a lot of wildfires, and the Forestry Commission works very hard to try and make sure that the wildfires don't do too much damage. And a few years ago, their strategy was orientated around, as soon as a fire started, put out the fire. Seems very sensible, doesn't it? Now, what that meant was that for a long time, the fires were well controlled. But what that meant also at a bigger level was because there weren't any fires burning away all the leaves and all the small twigs that were normally accumulating in the forest, that meant that more and more dead matter was accumulating on the forest floor. Another way of seeing this is that more and more fuel was accumulating on the forest floor. So that meant that when a really big fire broke out, there was so much fuel, so much dead wood, so much dead leaves in place that it became uncontrollable, and it burnt the whole forest down. And what this goes to show is that the Forestry Commission realized they were focused on perceiving the wrong problem. They believed the problem was putting out the fire, when actually there's a bigger problem there. The real problem is about managing the forest ecosystem and ensuring that it maintains its balance. And so what they've moved to is a strategy now of allowing fires to happen to burn off in a safe way the dead growth without putting the forest in danger, rather than just trying to put out all the fires. And so we can see here another way of perceiving the danger of perceiving problems. So in front of you, you have a picture that confronted a gentleman who was trying to build safer bombers for the Allied forces in World War II. Now this man called Abraham Wald faced the following challenge. Where do you put the armor on the plane? Because if you have to protect a plane, you put more metal, more armor on the plane to protect it. But more armor also means a heavier plane, a slower plane. There's less range on the plane. It has a whole bunch of compromises. So you can't just put armor everywhere on the plane. So what he did is he did a test to see, where are planes getting shot, and hopefully that would reveal where planes should put their armor. So on the left was what a normal plane would look like, and then on the right, in other words, the plane that's mainly in black, it showed where planes were getting shot. So these are the planes that landed back again at the airbase, and basically these planes are being shot everywhere apart from in the middle you can see the cockpit, and at the end you can see the white circle representing the tail. And so he thought, where should I put the armor? Let's ask yourself that question. Where would you put the armor on the plane? The black shows where all the bullet holes are, and the white shows where the planes are not getting shot. Now, most people thought, well, obviously, this is simple. You put the armor where the black is, because that's where the planes are getting shot. But Abraham Wald, it is in fact the complete opposite, because the planes that were getting shot in the black area were the ones that were able to make it back home, whereas the planes that were actually getting shot in the cockpit and were getting shot in the tail are the ones that crashed. In other words, the crucial areas of the plane to protect are the cockpit and the tail. And that's why he recommended to the US Air Force, and they did, that they armor those particular areas. And as a consequence, many more lives and planes were saved. And all of that was possible because Abraham Wald was able to perceive the real problem that he was facing. And so, in summary, why does perspective matter for leaders and their ability to solve problems? It's that our perceptions and assumptions define the reality that we see. In order to be successful, we first of all need to perceive the right problem. If we have the wrong understanding of the problem, the wrong perceptions, then we're going to solve it in the wrong way, and that's going to result in more problems later on. So a simple way of making sure that you can do this is to compare these two approaches. So the traditional approach is to say there's one problem, and we're going to solve that by creating one answer, the plan, and we're going to solve that problem by implementing the solution as described by the plan. And as you can see here, it's only one problem, there's only one perspective on the problem, there's only one possible plan, and there's only one possible solution. Further, it's a linear process, so it starts with a problem and ends with a solution. Now, many of you will probably have realized in life that the so-called solutions that have been created actually end up becoming bigger problems 6 months down the line. And so this approach is fundamentally flawed in the 21st century. We need to take a new approach, which is the one on the right. And this one recognizes that you still need to have the awareness of the problem, the plan, and the solution, but that it's a feedback dynamic. So the first point is that you're looking at the problematical situation, not just the problem. So what this means is it's the awareness, and the problematical situation is the awareness that there are many different ways of perceiving the problem. It's emphasizing that there's not one problem, but that there's a situation that from multiple perspectives can be perceived in different ways. So your task as a leader is first of all to understand what is the problematical situation by talking to as many people as possible to get as many perspectives as possible. And that ties into point 2. Not only do you want to get as many perspectives as possible, you want to have as many diverse perspectives as possible. To use a very cliched example, let's imagine that you're in the boardroom. Now, if we look at statistically, certainly in the West, boardrooms tend to be occupied by old white males. Now, if you all ask all those old white males what their perspective is on a situation, you're going to get a certain kind of response because it's a very undiverse group. No matter how intelligent those individuals are, there's a fundamental limit in how much diversity perspective there is. So that's why it's important in a multicolored world to be going out there and getting perspectives from many different stakeholders, not just in terms of ethnicity, but also age group. So, for example, looking at people who are, what do the under 20s say? What do the under 30s say? Or gender, female versus male, culture, religion. There's an endless possibility of diversity here. The key point is that you're looking for diverse perspectives. You're not just looking for the same old people to say the same old stuff, because that's not going to reveal anything new. And then thirdly, you're looking at this concept of that solutions have consequences. So yes, you might have a possible solution that can improve the problematical situation, but what are the consequences of that? And how will they in turn lead you back to point 1? Because you might implement a solution, but it's just going to create more problems further down the line. And so what the leader needs to be doing is to have that awareness of these 3 key points and understanding how they interact with one another. By doing this, we call this an attitude of epistemic humility. And what that basically means is epistemology is the study of knowledge, how you know that you know. And what this implies, this term of epistemic humility, is that you're humble about what you know. You recognize the limits of your knowledge, and you don't believe that you have the one problem, you have the one answer, and you have the one solution. And that instead, you're working to build a much richer and more sophisticated understanding by accessing problematical perspectives, diverse perspectives, and recognizing how the solutions can have consequences. So practical tips for perceiving the problem would be that you need to understand that the first step to building a solution is to have the right perception. If you just charge in mindlessly without really thinking about what the right problem is, you're guaranteeing that you're going to fail because you're not going to be able to understand what the real issues are that drive the complex situation. So do yourself and your team a huge favor, and rather than charging in, take a moment to breathe, step back, and ask yourself, what is the real problem here? Secondly, use that attitude of epistemic humility. Seek to understand the problematical situation by accessing diverse perspectives, and pay attention to how your proposed solutions will cause consequences that in fact might create more problems in the future. And then finally, use the reality device as an effective mechanism for building more awareness and integrating understanding from different people. And the overall result will be a dramatic improvement in your awareness of the situation, and therefore your awareness to solve the problem. So in summary, focus on getting the right perception of the problem. Without that, you can't do anything. Be humble on how you work with people and respect the boundaries of your knowledge. And step 3, as Dwight Eisenhower said, constantly rework your perceptions. You're looking to be good at planning, not making a great plan. So always challenge your perceptions, challenge your assumptions in order to be able to perceive the right reality.